Hi, I'm Rachel, and this is my first AM reading video in a while, and it's coming out on hopefully Wednesday, December 18th, uh, 2024. And as seems to be way too usual for me in the wintertime, I'm finding time to film in the morning and battling the sunlight. So this will probably look a little weird. Maybe it'll make me keep things a little short and sweet. I don't know how long my battery will last. So that's what I'm up against now. And anyway, I do have books to share about what I've been reading so far in December. And excitingly, now that I'm going back to my reading videos, I'm going to start, should I put it over here, with the first short story in this collection, the Ocean State Review, because I like to start these reading videos with a short story from a literary journal. And what do you know, I've read the author of this first short story, The Boys, before. This is by Margot Singer, and a little while back I read her short story collection, which was a Jewish-themed short story collection, but actually I think this main character, Sam, if she has a, religious or cultural affiliation, it seems to be Christianity. And the general theme of this story is of death and of the main character Sam's sort of, anxiety around it. And she starts getting like these heart palpitations, starting very ominously when she's awoken in the middle of the night in a really cold night by the sound of someone jogging. And she's sure that he's about to die of hypothermia, and that's exactly what happens. And then things go on from there, and she feels these palpitations for events like further and further away, and it goes into some ruminations about her son, who appears to be living off the grid, doing surfing and, other things in other countries, and she's dealing with the death of her father, although it seems like that was a while back. But I think these ruminations are supposed to be about life and death and moving on and living in this very male environment where she herself is reacting to these deaths of men, and it's sort of, I guess, a little bit about depression and malaise, but her one attempt at therapy doesn't seem to go that well either, and that she's kind of becoming a sourpuss with her husband and her best friend, and it's sort of ruminating. She does a little bit of cardiac treatment as well, but ruminating on, I guess, the issue of the world being such a sad, depressing place where we feel so deeply about these things. Yeah, I think the ruminations are interesting. Some of the plot points, I guess, are a little eyebrow archy. I don't know. I don't usually go that heavy into magic stuff in literary stories, like where she can sense the deaths of people far away, or this is unique to her. I don't know. Although I guess depression or whatever, or anxiety can feel unique to you. The son is so distant and doesn't seem to really check in much with the family, so it feels like more than she should care about that. I don't know. Although I guess it's a short story, so you don't have to go too deep into the weeds with characterization. But it was an interesting story. Ruminations on death and anxiety. It worked. The first novel I finished this month is Blind Sight by Meg Howrey. This novel takes me into my final reading project of the month, my author's backlist reading project. Did I say problem before? Maybe it's a problem because I have to, fit in so much reading before the end of the month. But anyway, in January, I'm hoping to make a video where I compare this Meg Howrey book to two others that I hope to read later in the month. This comes after reading her science fiction book, The Wanderers, a few years ago, and so then I decided to put her on my list because she'd written other more literary fiction books. And this one is her debut. It is about a 17-year-old kid named Luke who, is growing up with actually a very countercultural, spiritual female family in Delaware. And he gets the sudden news that his father has found him and wants to reconnect with him. And his father, what do you know, happens to be a relatively famous actor from a science fiction television show and other things. So his mother and so forth, so they allow him to go visit the father for 10 weeks in LA. And it's obviously sort of a big culture shift for him, and relationship shift as he actually gets to know this man. And he's, we see it like almost in a double space, like Howrey has these first person characterizations of Luke where he's attempting to write college essays about his life, and then we see Luke and his father interact, personally, and then like in the press junket sort of stuff in third person. It's I think a largely understated novel about relationships and trying to like find a grounding with somebody who's like completely new to you, but you obviously have this sort of intimate backstory. And then Luke comes home, and I felt like the interesting thing there, or maybe I would have, refocused the story a little, would be, the interesting thing to me is like, that push and pull, because he was raised one way with, one parent and they had one type of relationship, and now everything shifts because the second parent is in his life. But the thing I didn't like is how we kind of went for low-hanging melodramatic fruit, like a plot twist sort of thing, and I wish she hadn't. But the things that interested me most were, this is a Bildungsroman of Luke as a 17-year-old realizing that, he has this whole other parent and this whole other, perspective and relationship out there, and like, this push and pull as he himself is, growing up and trying to figure out who he is, with, some quirky parent, one quirky parent and one parent who, is perhaps unusually famous compared to what the rest of us deal with. But overall, I certainly liked a lot of the character work in here. The next book I finished on audio is The Cost of Free Land by Rebecca Clarren. I am excited to get to this one. I meant to get to it during Nonfiction November, but then instead I decided to read another nonfiction book then in time for a book club. But this one had been on my radar for a while, and then back in the spring the author did a Zoom conference with my synagogue's book club where she talked about the book. The general gist of the book is that Clarren's family grew up in what is called Jew flats. They were homesteaders. They took advantage of a U.S. law from the mid-1800s where the U.S. was giving out free land that the homesteaders could keep if they were able to cultivate it over 6 years. And ultimately the question of where the free land came from is largely through broken treaties with the Lakota indigenous people. Clarren's ancestors had a vague to non-existent sort of relationship and understanding of all of that back in the day. But as a journalist covering, the Midwest and the Western American realities, Clarren became more aware of it and realized that the land her ancestors came to live on was in effect stolen. Stolen land, not directly by them, but by the government, and she's wondering what amends should be taken. And in talking with Lakota elders, they encourage her to go to her own indigenous roots, and so as a Jewish person, that means turning to Chavruta study, that's, paired study, like with her local rabbi, looking into the ancient texts about reconciliation. Judaism has a lot of them. There were fewer of those reconciliation texts in this book than I was actually expecting, although it was a really detailed accounting of what was happening with the Lakota people, starting at the very beginning of the land thefts and the national myths that were built up around, simplistic stories or just outright lies about what happened. And then she juxtaposed against what was going on with her family, and there were complications as well because her family were also escaping from oppression. One of her ancestors was brutalized in a pogrom in the early 1900s. And so that's how they ended up in Jew Flats, is what the area was called in South Dakota where their ranch was. She's telling this story side by side, going a little into the trauma of both peoples, and then going into trying to understand what her family did or didn't know about the realities of how they benefited, like on a in specific ways. And then also she goes into some of the trauma in her family, like from the pogrom, like the ancestor who was, brutalized, had problems for the rest of his life. There were also issues of one of her ancestors going into bootlegging during, Prohibition, and kind of taking a fall for things in a way that feels like maybe it was anti-Semitic. So there's sort of a lot going on in this, and it's, I think, in a way, a lot of it is about accounting things, like factually, and then about sort of shouldering responsibility, I suppose, is how she would see it. And it is a book that is very sort of proactive. It's an activist book in its way. It's sort of asking, especially at the end, what steps anyone should take to reconcile for those of us in the U.S. who are non-Indigenous. We all benefit in some ways, at least, from stolen land, and how to go about trying to seek restitution, and what she and her family have ultimately done to do that. So it's a moving book, and sort of, because it's a book that's sort of asking you to engage that way about restitution and culpability, maybe it could be like a little polemic, but I feel like she's not, I don't think she's overdoing any sort of like moral purity or anything. It seems very honest and humble, and not about necessarily seeing groups of people in terms of like good and evil, although certainly the U.S. government, through policy, have done many systematic things against the Lakota that just are, harmful, genocidal, etc. So yeah, in a way it was a different sort of book. It was a very personal book for me because my family, we came from around the same area, around the same time, my Jewish family, and we settled around the same location in the Midwest. There were a lot of Jews from the Russian Empire who were sort of forced westward because there was some nativist anti-Semitic, upset in New York and other urban areas. So the established German Jews were very much encouraging the newer arrived Russian Jews to go west. So that's where my family ended up as well, even though we weren't homesteaders, as far as I know. Although certainly this book is making me think of all the ways I should be researching family history. And so yeah, I'll link to the blog post I wrote about this book and this talk down below. I think for any U.S. readers, people interested in U.S. history, or Jewish Americans and people interested in Jewish American history, this could be an intriguing book. And finally, I am finally making some progress in The Lost Puzzler by Eyal Kless, which I think I added to my Goodreads currently reading shelf like months ago. And I was kind of kicking it down the way for a while and, putting other books in front of it. But now we're at the end of the year and I'd like to finish this book and its sequel as well. So here we are. I'm just a little way into it though so far, but certainly by my next damn reading video, I hope to be finished. So we are in a dystopian future in this world. It's a sort of gritty, underworld sort of setting, and our main character appears to be some sort of historian who has gone to this really rough, almost like, I guess, archetypally rough sci-fi city where, a bunch of lowlifes, I guess, are hanging out and brawling and going to bars and that sort of thing, and there's lots of prostitution. We're also in a world that's like post-catastrophe, and there was this sort of Tarkarin, I guess, advanced society with a lot of tech, and the remnants of that technology are now being used to sort of augment people, to make them into like, augmented fighters and that sort of thing with rusty tech, and they call themselves trolls, and they brawl or provide protection to, higher up people who visit this city. And so we're setting up this gritty atmosphere as our main character is going to meet this woman who works like in a gambling den in one of the most dangerous saloons, or whatever you'd call it, get the bars. and he is looking for information on a boy who disappeared some time ago, and I think is going to have some pretty big implications about the catastrophe and other world-building things in this book that hopefully I will find intriguing. So there we have it. I'm my official foray into the lost puzzler in this world, and I will report back. And that about covers it for me now. I hope you were at least able to see some of the images, battling against the sun in this video. I hope to be back on this channel in the next couple of days with my monthly Author's Answer video, where I answer one of the reading or writing related questions posed by J.D. Archer, who's an author tuber, and his writing group. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, happy mid-month to everyone. I hope your reading is going well, and if you'd like to share anything about the books I've talked about or the books you're reading, I'd love to hear about it. And thanks so much for watching, everyone. I'll see you next time.